Hi everyone. So this is my last of my three-part series about the rise of Netflix, and here we're going to focus on where we've been since 2019 when the streaming wars began, where we are now, and where we might go from here, especially in light of Netflix pending acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. So let me set the stage. Now it's 2019. I had been a lawyer managing my own firm for a few years, and I just started my new and current role as an attorney at Shepherd Mullen, where I represent the studios. And the energy was a really interesting one to come into at that time. It was right at the beginning of the what became known as the streaming wars. Disney Plus didn't exist. HBO was still mostly linked to cable, but they did have their own standalone app. Peacock didn't exist. Paramount Plus didn't exist. Quibi, which a lot of people probably haven't heard of, was being suggested as a possible idea for what a new streaming platform could be for short form content. It didn't work out, but that was generally the idea. And we were kind of in this era where Netflix was now famous for basically greenlighting everything. From the whole 2010s, they made just so much content. And they're starting to get criticism. People were saying, hey, this seems like you're prioritizing quantity over quality. And the truth was that they were building a library because they knew eventually all the studios were going to keep their own content for themselves and not license it to Netflix. So when that day came, Netflix had to be ready and had to tell people it's still worth paying us $20 a month or however much so that you can have access to all our stuff. Which, sure, maybe you're not going to watch all of it, but you're going to watch enough of it. And this whole idea of a Netflix original really started taking off. They made, Stranger Things, they made all kinds of shows, and many of them quite successful. And there was this energy that, the more we make, the more subscribers we'll get. So eventually, by 2020, before COVID had begun, all the studios were ready to launch their platforms and to say, hey, from now on, you can access every movie we've ever made for whatever the price is. Some were less than $15-20 a month, some were around that price. But in general, that was the concept. All of Warner's movies from the 30s when the Warner Brothers themselves were in charge, all the way till now, we're all going to be available on the streaming platform that you paid them. And also, as a consumer, it wasn't so much a loss of money either because people were used to paying over $100 to $150 for their cable every month. And now they were realizing, well, instead of that, I can pay 5 different companies $15-20 a month. So I still kind of end up saving some money if I don't get cable, and I still get all this content. So that was everything was set up for. And, the idea was, will all of these companies survive? Are there just as many people who want to pay Disney a monthly fee for all Disney movies forever as there are Universal through Peacock's films, or Paramount through Paramount Plus, or Warner through HBO? Well, things started off in a, chaotic way because COVID hit. So right as these platforms are all launching, as everyone's gearing up to make more content to feed these platforms, COVID-19 comes and there's a pandemic, production shuts down, there's a lot of uncertainty in the industry, but in a way, it kind of helps them escalate to get subscribers saying, well, now that you're all at home anyway, why don't you sign up for our new platform? And a lot of companies started experimenting the idea of, well, since I can't release theatrically, since people can't go to theaters, maybe I could, drive more subscribers to my streaming platform by having theatrical releases come directly to streaming. And, it took a while, and it's still, to some extent, people are still kind of figuring it out. Was it going to be as lucrative? Everyone was afraid of, the death of theatrical, and because of COVID, a lot of movies that are supposed to be theatrical releases weren't. Famously, there was a lawsuit between Scarlett Johansson and Disney where they had said that there would be a theatrical release, then it wasn't. And then they offered this kind of premiere access pass where you would pay, I think, $30 on top of your subscription to Disney Plus to watch that special movie. So there's been a lot of trial and error. And eventually, as these were kind of taking off, around 2022, 2023, there was a big, Wall Street moment where a lot of companies, including Netflix, started losing subscribers. And as a result of Netflix losing subscribers, pretty much for the first time, their stock crashed, or didn't crash, but it went down a lot. So by 2023, a lot of the companies are now really worried about the streaming model. They were pretty excited about it because they like the idea of everyone I get to subscribe is going to pay me $20 a month for the rest of their lives or until they cancel, but people don't really cancel, so they could get, infinite money theoretically, and that's what was making Netflix so successful. But then, the Wall Street folks basically took a look under the hood and said, hey, you're also spending a lot of money. You guys are making so much stuff. You're spending almost as much as you're making. So this kind of created a huge, panic almost in the entertainment industry. Theatrical numbers were going way down. People weren't going to movie theaters anymore. Again, partly because they kind of stopped. They got used to not going to the movies during COVID. People say this was always going to be a thing, that maybe COVID sped up the process, but where we basically were a couple years ago was the excitement was kind of fading, and the studios are realizing, well, we kind of need to keep theatrical, our traditional way of making money, and this new way just isn't as lucrative as the old ways of the 90s were. Eventually, Netflix reacted. They created, I think, an ad-supported platform. They started cracking down on password sharing, and eventually they got it back together and they shot up. But to me, what was, I think, very indicative of where Netflix is in all of this was in mid-2023, the show Suits became like the number one most streamed show on Netflix. I think Suits was available elsewhere. I think it was available on Amazon Prime the year before. But when it came to Netflix, it became, once again, for the first time since it stopped running, maybe 10 years before that, or maybe 5 to 10 years before that, it became a huge hit. And that's kind of where I personally realized that Netflix has this almost psychology to it where the consumer knows if something's on Netflix. Like if I tell you right now that, hey, Friends is on Netflix, there's something that happens where people think, oh, maybe I should rewatch all of Friends now. Whereas you could just go on HBO Max right now and watch Friends. Many people are subscribed to both anyway, so you have that option. But there's something about when it comes to Netflix that people say, oh, I want to rewatch all of this. And as the last couple of years have emerged, Netflix has kind of, stood up as basically saying, we invented the game, we know how the game works, and we are going to keep doing what we do. Now, famously, what Netflix does that's different than what the rest do is they don't really do theatrical releases, and that's a huge concern people have with the potential acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. Netflix doesn't release films in theaters. The only ones they ever did are kind of their Oscar movies because the Oscars require a certain minimum level of a theatrical run. And so Netflix would say, fine, we'll do the minimum. We'll let it out for 3 weeks, but we'll also have it available on Netflix because our model is we are Netflix. We do things through Netflix. You pay us, you watch our movies. They weren't really in the marketing for a theatrical release and trying to get a high box office. Their priority is, sure, we love an Oscar, but we do things a certain way. That's always worked for us. We're not trying to release Red One to come to theaters, but you can watch it on, on your Netflix channel. So, with all this in mind, now it's fair to say that they weren't defeated. There was this fear, or some people thought, well, now that once all the other studios can do what they do, they're going to be crushed. They weren't crushed through their original content, through building their library, and just through the psychology of being Netflix, and also I would say their international appeal. They did what they did in the U.S. pretty much around the world, and as much as there's a huge fight in the U.S. for kind of market share, abroad Netflix is leading the way. So there is this something about them being there first that gave them this kind of protection from the changes, and so now they're so successful that they are about to buy, or trying to buy, Warner Brothers Discovery. So before we end, I'm going to get into what that could mean. First of all, they're going to be getting huge IP. So we're talking all of the DC universe, Harry Potter, but it's not including some things that Warner owns, like CNN, TNT, some of the cable channels. Netflix is like, we're not in that game. We're in a content game, and we would love all the content. A lot of people, though, think that they're going to kill theatrical, basically. They're going to, say, hey, we're not releasing any more DC movies in theaters. They're all going to come straight to Netflix. My hot take, my personal take, is I think there's just as much likelihood that Netflix will enter the theatrical space. I think it makes sense that they avoided it for so long because, at the end of the day, it wasn't their game. But now they're buying a company, and that is very much that company's game. Those people that they're buying have relations with distributors. They've been doing this for a while. And at the end of the day, it's just still the most lucrative way to make revenue for a motion picture. Having people pay money per ticket to go see a movie is always going to be way more money than the alternatives. And in Netflix's case, it's kind of additive. It's kind of, yes, you can watch it on streaming, or if you want to watch it earlier in theaters, they'll get $20 to $30 at this point per ticket. And I think there's just so much potential revenue that they wouldn't just ignore it out of stubbornness and refusal to want to do theatrical. We'll see. I'm kind of the only one that I know who has that position. Most people are taking the position that Netflix is famous for not doing theatrical releases, and they're only going to keep doing that. So that's where a lot of fears come from. And then, of course, there's the general antitrust fears of, too much power and consolidated. Netflix buying HBO is a huge deal. But believe it or not, it all began with the concept of renting out video cassettes. Once they went to DVDs, Netflix came in and said, hey, I can mail you DVDs and I won't charge you late fees. And that little nugget of opportunity turned into a multi-billion-dollar company that is now poised to buy one of the most highly respected entertainment companies of all time. And we'll see what they do with it. A lot of people think the merger might not go through. We'll see. It's certainly exciting. It's certainly controversial. And I'm sure after watching this video, a lot of you will probably check to see what's on Netflix tonight. And with that, enjoy. And we'll see where it goes.